What if the man behind the mask, the armor, the smile, was quietly fighting a battle you never saw? Pedro Pascal, one of the most beloved actors of our time, is known for playing protectors, warriors, survivors. But in real life, he's protecting something else: his peace, his balance, his mental health. Beneath the fame, beneath the performances, Pedro has lived with anxiety quietly, deeply, and courageously. And that truth changes everything. In the next few minutes, we'll explore the science of anxiety, Pedro Pascal's personal journey, and what we can all learn from the way he copes not as a celebrity, but as a human being. Because anxiety doesn't just live in our minds, it lives in our bodies, in our relationships, and in the way we show up in the world. Pedro Pascal is one of the most recognized faces in modern television. From the helmeted bounty hunter in The Mandalorian to the grieving father figure in The Last of Us, his characters are often strong, resilient, and emotionally complex. He's become a fan favorite admired not just for his talent, but for his warmth, humility, and charisma. But there's another side to Pedro, one that doesn't always appear in interviews or red carpet appearances. A quieter, more personal truth. Pedro Pascal has openly admitted that he lives with anxiety. And that simple fact changes everything because it reminds us of something most people forget, that anxiety does not discriminate. It doesn't skip over the famous or the successful. It lives in the minds of students and CEO, teachers and actors, introverts and extroverts alike. It lives in people who appear confident. It lives in those we admire. Pedro Pascal once described feeling crippled by self-doubt, not just before he made it big, but even after he became a household name. Even after the awards, the applause, the acclaim. And that's what anxiety does. It whispers, "You're not good enough," even when the world tells you otherwise. He didn't chase fame for validation. Acting, for him, was about expression, not attention. But as his profile grew, so did the pressure, and the pressure brought something else: emotional exhaustion. This is a common pattern. Neuroscience shows that chronic anxiety is not always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. It's the racing thoughts before bed, the chest tightness before a conversation, the second guessing that lingers after a decision. For Pedro, anxiety wasn't just an occasional visitor, it was a shadow that followed him through success. And it still does. But here's why his story matters. When someone like Pedro Pascal talks about anxiety, it gives the rest of us permission to talk about it too. It normalizes the conversation. It reminds us that vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a bridge, a connection, a beginning. And in a world that celebrates constant performance, Pedro's quiet honesty is a breath of fresh air. Because anxiety doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like Pedro Pascal. To understand Pedro Pascal's experience and the experiences of so many living with anxiety, we have to go beneath the surface. We have to look inside the body and into the brain. Anxiety is not a flaw. It's not a failure of willpower, and it's not something you can simply snap out of. It's a biological process, hardwired into the human nervous system. It starts in a part of the brain called the amygdala. This small, almond-shaped structure is responsible for detecting danger. When it senses a threat, real or perceived, it sends signals to the rest of the body to prepare for action. The heart races. The breath shortens, muscles tense. The mind begins to scan for problems. This is called the fight or flight response, and it's designed to protect us. In the past, it helped our ancestors survive real threats like predators or natural disasters. But in the modern world, the threats look different. They sound like criticism, like public pressure, like self-doubt. Pedro Pascal isn't facing a lion, but his brain doesn't always know that. when he steps into a high-stakes role, or faces intense media attention, or even reads online opinions about his performance. The amygdala can react the same way, and over time, this constant low-level alarm system leads to what we call chronic anxiety. It's not a single panic attack, it's a state of ongoing hypervigilance, a background hum of worry that never quite turns off. And here's the most important part, it's not his fault. Science shows that anxiety is shaped by a mix of genetics, environment, early life experiences, and brain chemistry. Some people like Pedro may simply be more sensitive to emotional stimuli. Their brains feel more, notice more, remember more. That sensitivity can be a strength, but it also makes them more vulnerable to internal storms. Pedro has never pretended to have all the answers, but by sharing his truth, he invites us to look at anxiety not as something shameful, but as something understandable, something human, and that changes everything. Because when we stop blaming ourselves for how we feel, we create space to start healing. Pedro Pascal doesn't wear his anxiety like a costume. He doesn't dramatize it. He simply acknowledges it quietly, honestly, and then finds ways to keep moving forward. And what's remarkable is that many of the things he leans on to manage his anxiety are supported by science. Let's explore 3 simple but powerful tools Pedro uses and how they impact the brain. The first is connection. Pedro is known for his deep, sincere friendships not only off screen but on it. His bond with Bella Ramsey, for example, isn't just professional, it's deeply emotional. They've spoken about comforting one another during hard filming days, laughing between scenes, sharing personal stories. Science tells us that strong social bonds reduce the levels of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. At the same time, those connections release oxytocin, a hormone that promotes safety, calm, and trust. In other words, being close to people we care about physically alters our stress response. It soothes the nervous system. For Pedro, friendship is more than comfort, it's chemistry. The second tool is creative expression. Pedro has described acting as emotionally exhausting but also necessary. He pours his inner world into the characters he plays. Joel, in The Last of Us, isn't just a man hardened by loss, he's a reflection of Pedro's own anxieties, fears, and emotional depth. This is no coincidence. Research in neuroscience shows that creative expression activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, planning, and perspective. When we create, we engage the thinking mind in a way that calms the emotional mind. Pedro isn't escaping anxiety through acting. He's transforming it. He's giving his emotions a shape, a story, a place to land. The third is humor. Pedro Pascal is loved for his charm, but more than that for his playfulness. In interviews, he cracks jokes. He smiles, makes fun of himself, and plays along with internet memes that lovingly call him daddy. But here's the science behind the smile. Humor is medicine. Laughter releases endorphins, the brain's natural feel, good chemicals. It also relaxes muscles, lowers stress hormones, and activates reward centers in the brain. For Pedro, humor isn't a mask, it's a tool. It's a way to reset his nervous system, to take himself a little less seriously, even when life feels overwhelming. And these 3 things, connection, creativity, and humor, offer us a model, not a cure, but a way forward, because anxiety may be strong, but your brain, your relationships, and your imagination are stronger. In our modern world, sensitivity is often misunderstood. People are told to toughen up, to stop overthinking, to just relax. But for those who live with anxiety like Pedro Pascal, these words miss the point entirely, because sensitivity isn't a weakness. It's a form of intelligence, a way of moving through the world with heightened awareness, and when harnessed with care, it becomes a powerful gift. Pedro is known for his emotional depth on screen. When he plays a role, it doesn't feel acted, it feels lived. There's a weight behind his words, a knowing in his silence. That's not just talent, that's lived emotional sensitivity. It's awareness turned into art. Science helps us understand why. A recent study in the Journal of Neuroscience found that individuals with anxiety often show increased activity in regions of the brain associated with empathy and emotional memory, particularly the anterior cingulate cortex and insula. This means people with anxiety are actually more attuned to the emotional states of others. They pick up on subtle cues, they anticipate outcomes, they think deeply and feel even more. This might explain why Pedro's performances resonate so profoundly. He's not pretending to understand pain, he knows it, he respects it, and when he expresses it, we feel seen. This level of sensitivity comes with challenges, of course, overthinking, self-doubt, emotional exhaustion. But it also brings strengths like intuition, compassion, and creativity. In many ways, Pedro Pascal's quiet anxiety gives him the emotional language to portray characters with incredible humanity. And off-screen, that same sensitivity shows up in how he treats others. His interviews are often filled with gratitude, with humility, and with kindness even in high-pressure settings. He listens. He thinks before he speaks. He gives space to others. In a culture that rewards loudness, Pedro stands out by being gentle. And that's not accidental. That's intentional. That's strength. So if you've ever been told that you're too sensitive, or that your emotions are too much, or that your worries are irrational, remember this: your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's evidence of a finely tuned nervous system, one that simply needs care, regulation, and support. Pedro Pascal's story reminds us that you don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to hide your emotions to succeed. You don't have to be fearless to be brave. You can be quiet and powerful. You can be sensitive and still shine. And sometimes it's the people who feel the most, who have the most to give. When we look at Pedro Pascal today, we see a man who's loved around the world. But when we look closer, we see something even more meaningful: a man who chose to be honest about his fear, who chose to show up, even when it was hard, even when his mind was loud, and in that quiet bravery, there's a lesson for all of us. Anxiety doesn't go away just because your life improves. It doesn't disappear with success, money, or fame. What changes, what truly transforms, is how we relate to it. We begin to understand that anxiety is not the enemy. It's a signal that something in our system needs attention. Maybe it's a need for rest. Maybe it's a reminder to slow down. Maybe it's asking for connection or reassurance or stillness. The science is clear. Anxiety is not permanent. The brain is plastic. That means it can change, rewire, and relearn even after years of chronic stress. Through tools like deep breathing, mindful movement, connection, nourishing foods, better sleep, and therapy, the nervous system slowly recalibrates. Cortisol levels begin to drop. The amygdala becomes less reactive. The body relearns how to feel safe. This isn't an overnight fix. It's a process, a journey, and people like Pedro Pascal remind us that the journey is worth taking. Because when we normalize the conversation about mental health, when we say, out loud, that it's okay to struggle, we create space for healing. We make it safer for others to be honest, and we remind ourselves that even in our most vulnerable moments, we still have value. Pedro doesn't hide behind characters. He brings himself into them. He transforms fear into art, doubt into presence, anxiety into empathy, And in doing so, he shows us something truly powerful, that you can live with anxiety and still live a full, meaningful life, that you can have intrusive thoughts and still be kind, generous, and loved, that you can feel broken sometimes and still be whole. So if you're watching this today and you felt like anxiety is holding you back, know this: there is nothing wrong with you. You are not behind. You are not weak. You are a human being with a beautifully sensitive brain. Learning to find balance in an overstimulating world. Keep going, keep breathing, keep reaching out, because healing doesn't come from pretending to be okay. It comes from honoring the truth and showing up anyway. Just like Pedro, and just like you, anxiety may feel unpredictable, but science tells us it can be gently guided. Just like Pedro Pascal uses creativity, connection, and humor to navigate his emotional world, there are simple daily habits, supported by decades of neuroscience, that help regulate anxiety naturally. Let's explore 5 of them. 1. Deep, controlled breathing. One of the fastest ways to calm the nervous system is to activate the vagus nerve, which runs from the brain to the gut. When we breathe slowly, especially with longer exhales than inhales, we trigger the body's natural rest and digest response. Even 1 minute of deep breathing can reduce heart rate, lower blood pressure, and quiet the amygdala. That's powerful, and it's free. Try this. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Repeat. That's it. You're already helping your brain calm down. 2. Movement, not for fitness, but for flow. Exercise isn't just good for the body, it rewires the brain. Physical movement increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, a protein that protects neurons and supports emotional regulation. You don't have to run marathons. A 20-minute walk, gentle yoga, or even dancing in your room can elevate your mood, reduce cortisol, and help shift anxious energy out of the body. 3. Magnesium-rich foods. Pedro Pascal often jokes about his coffee habits, but what we eat or don't eat directly affects the brain. Magnesium, found in foods like almonds, spinach, pumpkin seeds, and dark chocolate, plays a key role in regulating the nervous system. Studies show that people with chronic anxiety often have low magnesium levels. Even small dietary shifts can reduce symptoms naturally. 4. Digital boundaries. Fame brought Pedro into the spotlight and into the constant feedback loop of social media. But even for those outside the public eye, constant notifications, comparisons, and doom-scrolling overstimulate the brain. Science suggests that screen breaks, especially within 60 minutes of waking or sleeping, help the brain return to a calmer baseline. Try reclaiming those moments for silence, breathing, or journaling. 5. Sleep not optional. Sleep is when the brain heals. During deep sleep, emotional memories are processed, cortisol levels are reset, and the prefrontal cortex is restored. Without consistent rest, anxiety becomes louder, more intrusive, more reactive. Aim for 7 to 8 hours each night. Make your room cool, dark, and phone-free. Let your mind rest so it can face tomorrow with clarity. Pedro's story teaches us that managing anxiety isn't about erasing it, it's about creating a daily environment where the brain feels safe. These small habits create lasting change. Music softens to a heartfelt, hopeful tone, warm strings, or piano. Pedro Pascal didn't set out to become a mental health advocate. He didn't write books on anxiety. He didn't speak at psychology conferences. He didn't claim to be an expert. And yet, his story is quietly helping millions. Why? Because when someone we admire, someone strong, successful, and loved, admits that they struggle too, something shifts inside us. The shame around our own emotions begins to melt. The belief that we have to have it all together starts to loosen, and in that space, healing begins. Pedro Pascal's story matters because it tells the truth. It tells us that success doesn't erase pain, that anxiety can coexist with achievement, that emotional sensitivity can be a source of power, not a problem to hide. In one interview, Pedro admitted that he often felt like he didn't belong, that even with all the recognition, there was still a voice in his head questioning everything. That quiet confession holds a mirror up to society's misunderstanding of mental health. So many people assume that anxiety looks like panic. But often it looks like high, functioning professionals, it looks like straight, students, it looks like actors delivering flawless performances all while holding back tears between takes. Pedro reminds us that the people who smile the most are sometimes the ones who fight the hardest, and that's why representation matters. When we only hear about mental health in clinical settings, it can feel distant. But when we see someone like Pedro Pascal, someone who lives, laughs, struggles, creates, and thrives with anxiety, we begin to believe that we can do the same. We stop seeing anxiety as a barrier to life and start seeing it as something we can carry with grace. This isn't about idolizing celebrities, it's about humanizing the experience of anxiety. Pedro Pascal has never claimed to have it all figured out. He simply continued to show up, to create, to love, to feel even when his mind was telling him to run away. And that, in itself, is a form of quiet courage. So when your anxiety flares up, when your chest tightens or your thoughts spiral, remember this: you're not alone, you're not broken, you're walking the same path that millions walk, including people you admire, including Pedro Pascal, and with each breath, each step, each small act of self-kindness, you're healing too. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, the next time anxiety creeps in and your heart races, remember this: you're not weak, you're wired to feel, and there's strength in that. Pedro Pascal's story isn't about having all the answers, it's about showing up anyway. It's about learning to live fully, even when the mind is loud, and you can do the same, one breath at a time, one moment at a time. Because healing doesn't come from being perfect, it comes from being present. Thank you for watching. This is Dr. Lai Inspired, where we explore the science of healing and the human stories behind it.